Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dane, your host. Hope you're having a great day wherever you may find yourselves. Today is another retrospective episode, and specifically we'll be taking a look back to Rush's third album, Caress of Steel. Notice the beautiful artwork on the front cover, the necromancer you have here, and on the back you have the Fountain of Lamneth to give you a taste of what's to come on the inside, the two great epics that are on here. This is the gatefold digipack from the Sector 1 box set. You got some lyrics here that you can't read without a lens, and you've got the nice photographs from the original album on vinyl. And then this is a better sounding quality, and this is the original remasters. Pretty much the same deal, right, as far as cover goes. So I was introduced to the first three Rush albums in high school right off the bat as a freshman. I was familiar with Rush late in grammar school in 7th grade. I had heard Moving Pictures first in 7th grade, and then I ventured into their earlier stuff, specifically and only with A Farewell to Kings, which I love to death. And it wasn't until high school that I looked further into the discography of what they already had out. And so one day, early on in my freshman year, one of my classmates said, "Oh, you like Moving Pictures and Farewell to Kings, do you? Well, you need to check out their first three albums." And so he made me cassette tapes of the first three albums. And I had seen archives in the music store at Sound Warehouse. And I was always intrigued and thought about getting them with my allowance because, you know, it reminded me of the first box set, if you will, of Kiss's first three albums in one package called The Originals. And, of course, Archives has the gray background with the white star man symbol. But I never picked it up. I figured I would just wait one day and buy them individually for whatever reason. And so my friend made me these tapes, and I had an off period every day in high school where I would sit in the hallway, big hallway where you have the classrooms on the outside of each side. And so these cubicles were there for you to do your classwork or your homework, or, you know, just sit there and wait for your next class, your planning period, if you will, that kind of thing. So I would use this opportunity to listen to music because I was allowed to have headphones because I was in a cubicle and, you know, I'm not bothering anybody. And sometimes I would wait till after school to do that. But anyway, and I became immediately enthralled and impressed by these first three albums, especially the sophomore effort, Fly By Night, and Caress of Steel. Now, that does not mean I don't like the debut, and I'm quite fond of the debut, but it really, as an impressionable young man who is 14 and 15 years old, really made an impression on me, as I said. And so I became immediately captivated, and I wanted to, you know, look into more of Rush's catalog, and of course I did. But I remember, as soon as I got my next allowance, I got the first three albums on vinyl, and I didn't listen to the cassettes as much sometimes. So I'm grateful for my friend at the time to introduce me to more of the band. And so it's really not until the third album, it is until the third album that Rush fully commits their foray and movement into prog rock. It was released September 24th, 1975, the second album to be released in 1975, because Fly By Night came out in February, I believe. It was gold in Canada, 50,000 copies, and gold in the United States, 500,000 copies. You can compare this to Genesis's Nursery Crime in the sense that on here you have also Genesis's third album. You have two grand epics, not as long as what you have on the Rush album, but you have the musical box and you have the Fountain of Salamis, which are also wonderful. So in that sense, that's how Caress of Steel compares to Nursery Crime. And I like the comparison a lot. Now, if we start with Bastille Day, a great opening track for the album. It's very powerful. You have this great intro with the great bass guitar, right? And guitar. Great early wailings from Geddy. I know a lot of people don't like the early Geddy wailings, more into the 80s stuff, but it's so much part of my wheelhouse and my DNA. this song could almost fit into A Farewell to Kings because it has the lyrics, "The king will kneel and let his kingdom rise." And of course, the album cover, Farewell to Kings, and the song lyrics deal with moving away from corrupt monarchy into a more democratic state. It's very political, right? So while this album is produced much differently, has a different feel to A Farewell to Kings, like I said, it could almost fit. It definitely fits thematically and story-wise with A Farewell to Kings, but production-wise and engineering, not so much. It's close, though, I think, because both albums, as you'll see, have a medieval feel in many aspects. Anyway, the solo here is like the entire album. What I mean by that, the tone. I just love Lifeson's guitar tone on this album. Despite the fact that it's Rush still in their infancy stage or near infancy stage. I think it's fabulous. I've always gravitated towards Lifeson's guitar style right off the bat, is what I mean. So the tone is great. It has an almost medieval quality, as I said, to it, and at times an Eastern influence, and it's also reminiscent of Jimmy Page. So Lifeson is taking, the influences from Hendrix and Page and Clapton, and he's making it his own in his own right. Then we get to "I Think I'm Going Bald," and the song title and the song lyrics are a bit quirky and silly at first glance. Do I like the lyrics in the title? 100% no, but I understand why. A lot of people think that the narrator, in this case Geddy Lee, since he's singing, it's about his fear of losing his hair, or since Neil Peart wrote the lyrics, that it's his fear. It's actually Alex's fear. If you know your history of the band, somewhere, one of the documentaries or books or whatever, it might be in Martin Popoff's, one of his books, Neil's writing about Alex's fear of losing his hair at a young age because, being a rock star or not being a rock star, it's something that we don't want to happen, but inevitably happens to most men, whether now, sooner, or later, right? And so from that standpoint, it makes the song more understandable, why it's on the album and why it was released. And this song was also inspired by Kiss's "Going Blind," because Rush was touring with Kiss at the time. Anyway, so musically, I find this song amazing, musically. But as I said, the title and the lyrics are not good, or there's something left to be desired. I wouldn't say they're not good, they're just not, it's not Rush at its best. Having said that, the concerns in the lyrics are similar to what we get in Crosby, Stills and Nash, or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young on the Deja Vu album. I think the song is "Almost Cut My Hair," and the issue of maturing and growing up or aging even. Lord Byron talks about that in one of his poems about, thinking about buying a wig. And, and this is something that runs thematically through, or for the most part, thematically through the whole album, this notion of growing old and aging and maturing. We'll see more of that as I talk about the tracks. So "Almost Cut My Hair" makes me think of the song in that way, in that regard. It is a good song. However, I think it would have been an even greater song. Well, it's a good song. It would have been a great song or a fantastic song had the lyrics been different. Maybe "I Think I'm Going Mad" or something to that effect. Anyway, however, if we talk musically, the opening howl the opening echoing howl at the beginning of the song is just fantastic. The solo is phenomenal. I love the solo. And you have the lyrics, "My life is slipping away each and every day," and this foreshadows, of course, what's going on in The Fountain of Lamneth, which is the last track of the album. And the closing guitar piece on "I Think I'm Going Bald" is I think, remarkable. Now we come to Lakeside Park. And this is like so many songs and so many albums throughout, the ages, whether 70s, 80s, 90s. You get a hard rockin' album or a heavy metal rockin' album or, whatever. Black Sabbath comes to mind on Volume 4. You got a heavy rockin', kick-ass album, and then you got changes. Well, similarly, Lakeside Park is not as... Well, it is as melancholy, but it's melancholy in a different way. And tied to "I Think I'm Going Bald," Lakeside Park has that nostalgic or look back the virtue of one's memory of when we were young and when we could enjoy nature at the park and that kind of thing. Now that I'm growing old, I have to rely on memory for enjoyment, that kind of thing. And of course, when the band is writing this, they're not old at all, but you get the point. They're older, and so looking back to one's childhood. So it's a romantic kind of poem in the sense, romanticism as in English or British romanticism, Byron, Shelley, Keats, Wordsworth, Blake, and Coleridge, that kind of thing. The love of nature and looking back finally on those memories and how memories are so important. So that trip down memory lane for Pert, and I said it's a nature poem, so it's romantic in that sense. Like so many albums, it's got that slower or ballad type song on it, like Changes on Volume 4, as I said. So that's essential because while many of us, I can only speak for myself, but I know there are many of us who we buy an album that we expect to be hard and heavy metal and that sort of thing, and there may be too much ballady stuff, and we just want the one or two things, right? So Dokken comes to mind, that sort of thing. So anyway, so Rush gives you that ballady or slower song type of feel instead of the heavy stuff, right? And I don't mind that. Sometimes it's what I want, right? I want that one song that is that break from the heaviness, that slowing down, that emotionally driven or acoustically driven, that doesn't have to beat you over the head, that light and shade thing, and you get the light, right? So this is not a love song, but it is about love of nature. And as I said, it's tied to the previous song of Thinking of Going Bald, so that theme of remembering one's youth. And again, foreshadowing the tie to Fountain of Lamneth. Now we come to the Necromancer, and this is just a great treat. So you get part 1, Into Darkness, and you get the great eerie beginning that sets the mood of the entire song. Makes your hair stand on end, at least me. It's very compelling. And so the story goes that Pert has his voice disguised by some, voice disguising algorithm, or I'm not sure, maybe it's a vocoder. I never thought originally that it was Pert's voice, because I remember a friend of mine had the cassette for Billy Idol's Rebel Yell, and there's a song in here where, there's this narrator who's talking about closing your eyes and meditating, and it sounds just like the narration here. Did Pert do that as well, or is this simply not true? Did Pert even do the narration? So we're told that he did. Regardless, it's a great eerie beginning. It sets the mood. And Neil's, and if it is Neil, doesn't matter. There's that narrator, right? And of course, the song is an homage to Lord of the Rings, because you have a necromancer, very akin to Sauron, right? And Lyson's guitar in this song, is just phenomenal. It's amazing. It's just captivating. And part of what makes the song and the whole album, for the most part, especially the epics, is the soundtrack, the soundscapes for the story. So the music has that soundtrack feel to it, right? And it's just so emotional, and it's captivating. It fits right in. It tells you what the mood's going to be. It's amazing. And so you get the opening lines. Silence shrouds the forest, so you get a little alliteration. So now Geddy becomes the narrator. So you have a narrator with Pert, and then the vocalist takes on the role of a second narrator, right, to start the story. And Geddy's voice is just, I think, it compels you to listen at that, and that's, as a young man, 14 or 15, as I said, just gravitates and brings you in and invites you in, right? And then you get the phrase "iron tears," which tells you about the heaviness of the situation, the dramatic situation of our three travelers from Willowdale being captured by this evil presence, this evil force. And then, as he says "iron tears," Geddy does, the guitar kicks in again to, as the soundtrack, right, to let you know of the upcoming danger, or that the danger has begun, right? It signals the threat, if you will. And it gives you it gives you the heaviness of the situation. All right. Then you get part 2, Under the Shadow, and you get Neil again, if it is Neil. Then you get Getty picking up where he left off, brooding in the tower, watching o'er his lands, right? Talking about the dungeons that the three travelers from Willowdale are now held in. And you get this quintessential thing that most of us early Rush fans like, that stop start technique that the band uses, that that's that proggy tempo, right? Which I just love. It's a signature sound from Rush, if not other bands, definitely other bands. And then you get this amazing guitar solo. Again, the amazing tone is just phenomenal. And then you get the underlying bass and drums that complement that guitar solo so well. Just phenomenal. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. And then after the guitar solo in Under the Shadow, you get this echoing belch-like thing from the guitar. I'm not sure what the effects pedals are, but it's fabulous. And then it transitions to the three guys jamming. This is one of my favorite Rush moments of all time. It's just an instrumental. It's very heavy. It has a heavy Zeppelin-y feel, if you will. It's so Zeppelin-esque. I have to think they were inspired by Zeppelin in some way, because that's what it sounds like to me. And they're just having a good time. It's like I said, it's just one of the greatest, heaviest moments of Rush of all time. I love it. I never get tired of it. I look forward to it every time I play the song. And essentially what we have here in this instrumental piece where they're just jamming for a couple minutes is Zeppelin on steroids. That's how I look at it. It's one of their finest moments. Lifeson is going to town here. Getty is going to town. And Neil is going to town. Just fast, heavy, and furious. It foreshadows for me, anyway, something similar that happens on Metallica's Master of Puppets with that jamming section on Orion. All right, part 3, Return of the Prince. And the Prince is, of course, Bytor. And to this day, I always think about, how is Bytor 1 minute the villain in the previous album for Bytor and the Snow Dog, and now he's the hero and rescuer of the three men from Willowdale. Anyway, this is my least favorite part of the song. However, I still like it. It's not great, but it's good. And I get it. Now you have an acoustic piece. This part of the song begins with the acoustic guitar, and then you get Neil's disguised voice, again, if it is. And then Bytor and the narration and the song and the singing frees the three captives, and the necromancer is defeated, and the homage to Lord of the Rings is still apparent because his wraith or his spirit lives on, and it flees to, hint at, or it's implied that he's going to come back another day or torture someone else, that sort of thing. And this is, of course, Sauron before the Lord of the Rings in Mirkwood. All right. Then we get the Fountain of Lamneth, part 1 in the Valley. You get Getty singing and stepping into the role of the protagonist, like he does with 2112, and like so many of his characters, or Rush's characters, written from Neil's pen, right? So he talks about youth and freedom. He talks about life, quote unquote, unsung, which I could probably write an essay on those two words alone, life unsung. So he's a newborn, infant, early childhood, adolescence, but yet the sad part is that his character is already drawn to dreams of immortality instead of living his life. This should sound familiar to you, and we'll get to that later on. And what is tormenting him and giving him these dreams of immortality instead of living his life and enjoying life to the fullest is the mountain, where the Fountain of Lamneth is, which is the Ponce de Leon, if you will, Fountain of Youth. And as the narrator sings, the protagonist sings, it gives his heart no peace. Now, is he totally in despair? No. But there's clearly some melancholy going on, this wavering back and forth between joy and despair, or joy and depression, or joy and torment. He says in the early opening part of the song, he does not know of dust to dust, he lives from breath to breath, but then I live to climb that mountain to the Fountain of Lamneth. So this oscillation between joy and despair He's living from breath to breath, it seems, in the moment, but he's not really, because he's keeping his eye on the future too much and attaining immortality. And then we get part 2, which is just Didax and Arpets, whatever those words mean. It's just a short drum solo that ends with, I think, Neil shouting, "Listen, pay attention, something good is coming," right? And I like it. It's not great, but I do like it. Part 3, No One at the Bridge. This is such a great movement in the piece. So the protagonist is an adult now, or a young man, 17, 18, right? And he's on his odyssey. So I do believe there's a parallel between the protagonist, the nameless protagonist here, and Odysseus. Not exactly, but very similar. And because of the soundscapes and the guitar and the drums and the bass, but mostly the guitar, what Alex is doing is setting the mood again, like a soundtrack, and it gives you that feel that the protagonist is on a ship. Plus the lyrics help out with that too. So Geddy taking on the role yet again as protagonist, continuing that really. And like I said, the music is a soundtrack feel to paint the mood of the tale. And it works so well. Licensed guitar, once again, so powerful. And then some lyrics. Remembering when I first held the wheel in my own hands, so steering the ship, took to the helm so eagerly and sailed for distant lands. Now the sea's too heavy, and I just don't understand why must my crew desert me when I need a helping hand. So his crew's deserted him. Apparently they want to live their own life and enjoy it instead of going on this full crusade to reach immortality. Maybe they know better than he does, right? Who knows? But it's implied, right? So the sea's too heavy, meaning the literal sea and the sea of what's going on in his mind. He's maybe starting to feel some of the feelings of regret, and yet he carries on. He doesn't turn his ship around. He doesn't know why his crew has deserted him, and we not necessarily do either, but that's my idea, like I said. So we have this theme that's going to foreshadow a song I'm going to talk about later on a different album. This theme of excitement turning to despair, or excitement turning to torment, or excitement turning to resentment. So, and the song, the music does a great job of, like I said, of making you feel that you're at sea, or making you feel the protagonist at sea. Anyway, next you get part 4, Panacea, who is the personification of love and some other things. And this is a nice acoustic piece that I'm quite fond of. And what Rush does here is they take a typical rock and roll song about being with a woman physically. The guy spends time with a woman, and yet I got to move on in the morning. This is a great cliche in rock and roll. It's Freebird, right? I got to leave in the morning. Think of Living After Midnight, Judas Priest. There's even a Supertramp song that has that kind of lyric, and it's on Breakfast in America, I think, or even in The Quietest Moments. But I'm not thinking of the song in my head. But there's AC/DC comes to mind. There's so many songs about this. But the genius here, and yes, I'm using the word genius, that Rush takes a typical rock and roll song and turns it on its head and makes it about something more. It's not just about love him and leave him. There's another example, right? Kiss on Rock and Roll Over. It's about I must be on my way, not because I'm moving on to the next scene, the next town, the next road, turn the page and that sort of thing, right? Bob Seger. It's because of my quest of achieving immortality. Somehow immortality trumps or is greater than love. And yet the song ends as it's about to fade out. And my wandering body grieves. Okay? So he's torn. Next we get a true gem on the album, Part 5, Bacchus Plateau. I thought that they should have, I've always thought, and I still to this day think that Rush should have made this as a single. They could have, excised it from the bigger piece and released it as a single, and it would work. This is another example of the genius of turning things on its head. So like with Panacea, where they take a traditional getting busy with a woman and I've got to move on and, sorry, it was fun, but I got to move on type deal. and then making it about something else, does it, it's not just about love him and leave him, it's about quest for immortality, right? Here it's, hey, we're going to have a song about drinking, but it's not just about the party song. So it's part about partying, but it's steeped in melancholy. So it's not the typical, hey, we're having a good time, Kiss and that sort of Judas Priest kind of thing, rock and roll party songs from the 50s. It is that, but it turns it on its head because it's so much more. And again, it's genius, right? So now they take a song about drinking, but instead of a party mood, which it is, as I said, in part, it's couched in melancholy, okay? My soul is ever weary, another endless day, silhouettes of gray, another glass of wine. So this repetition of doing the same thing over and over, this is hinting at what's to come, right? Do you really want to be immortal if it's going to be, you're not immortal yet, and yet your whole day is, you're miserable because you're just repeating the same thing over and over. You're in a rut. The problem is right in front of the protagonist, and yet he sees it maybe, or he doesn't. But if he does see it, he does nothing about it, and he keeps plodding forward. That's how much this quest for immortality has a pull, a gravitational pull on his being and his soul, right? And what's great about the song is if you talk about the music, putting aside the lyrics, it has that medieval and Eastern influence feel. You have a tie to I Think I'm Going Bald because of the fear of aging. He says, give me back my wonder. I've got much more to live. I guess it really doesn't matter. So that kind of thing. So this song is in many ways like other parts of the song. The whole song is about the stages of life: birth, childhood, adulthood, and old age. But we'll come to more of that, right? So this fear of aging tied to I Think I'm Going Bald, right? And Lakeside Park. So again, that theme that I've been mentioning. And then what's really cool is the way the song ends. You get this guitar flutter, this fluttering guitar. It's like a guitar trying to sound or mimic a flute or oboe. Anyway, it's great. I think it's fun. It's almost like a flute or oboe is hooked up to a wah-wah pedal or effects pedal, but it's a guitar. The fade out is just great. Like the fade in, this song is bookended by a fade in and a fade out. Just wonderful. It's just great to hear on speakers or headphones. All right. Part 6, The Fountain. And this is the companion piece to the first piece. So what I mean by that, the first part of the song and the last part of the song, so 1 and 6, are essentially the same music, but you have different lyrics. And you have the motif that runs throughout the song here, and then the rest of the song, the da-da, da-da, ba, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Okay, so that's the leitmotif that runs throughout the album that segues between each of the tracks and in part of the tracks themselves, which works for the most part. So here, the protagonist arrives at the Fountain of Lamneth, and he says, I thought I would be singing or dancing or both, but I'm tired out of breath. There's a clue, right? And you have this great melancholy, we'll get back to that. You have this great melancholy guitar, and the tone, as I said, is wonderful, permeates throughout the album. Okay, it sets the mood, that soundtracky feel vibe that the guitar gives. And the song seems to come to an end after the leitmotif that I just mentioned. Ba-da, ba-da, da, 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 da. But then you have a moment of silence, and then the acoustic guitar comes back in. You think it's over, but it's not. So the acoustic guitar comes back in, and then Geddy's voice returns, and you hear him sing in a melancholy tone, I'm in motion, I am still, I am crying, there's a clue, I am still, I'm together, I'm apart, and forever at the start. And then he says, still I am. And then you have another moment of silence, and then you have this reverberating echo-type sound, and then the song finally ends. And so, the clues that are all in front of us, okay, give me back my wonder, another endless day, silhouettes of gray, my soul is every weary, right? He says the word in the final part of the song that I just said. He says the word still 3 or 4 times. He says he's crying. He says, I'm together. He's still alive, but he's apart. So something's not right. What is it? Well, we'll get to that. As I said, the tone here at the end, and like other parts of the song, is one of serious despair and serious regret or self-resentment, right? He got what he wanted, immortality, but he wasn't dancing, he wasn't singing, he was out of breath, he's not happy. This is what the Greeks called anagnoresis, the moment in a work of art, written work, music, whatever, where the character in particular discovers that they've done something that they shouldn't have, that, oh my God, what have I done? That is anagnoresis, that moment of regret, instant regret. I should not have done this. And so the notion is that he's lived his whole life searching for immortality, and in doing so, he's wasted his life instead of living his life. So this song foreshadows Xanadu to come on A Farewell to Kings. Thematically, the same thing. You have the protagonist in Xanadu excited at first in that opening lyrics, right? Quest for immortality. I will taste honeydew and drink the milk of paradise. When he does it, same lyrics, word for word at the end, or almost word for word, and he says, for I have tasted honeydew and drunk the milk of paradise. But now the tone, the second time around, is regret. So similar to the Fountain of Lamneth. This song, Fountain of Lamneth, so much foreshadows what's to come thematically in, Xanadu. The tone of regret, that anagnoresis, as I said. And so, as an English teacher, I recognize immediately similar in theme to Frankenstein. Frankenstein wants to bring an end to death, and he fails miserably. But the protagonist here succeeds in achieving immortality in both Rush songs, and yet they're miserable. Again, that's a similarity to Frankenstein's misery. And even more so, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh searches most of his life searching for immortality, and he fails instead of living his life to the fullest. But unlike the protagonist here in the Fountain of Lamneth, Gilgamesh eventually learns his lesson and does his best to live what's remaining of his life to the fullest, because he doesn't achieve that immortality, try it as he might. All right. So there's my analysis of the whole album. And because of all the things that I've said, I do not think this album is or should be given 2 stars out of 5 as it is on Wikipedia, or heavily panned by critics and fans alike. And again, I respect critics and fans not liking it. Hey, it's their opinion. But for me personally, is what I mean, I just think this is phenomenal, or close to it. Yeah, it's a precursor to 2112, but I dare say, I think sometimes that this is equally as good as 2112. Not better, but there are days like today, I think this is equally as good as 2112. It's just apples and oranges. Anyway, so, or grapes and raisins, right? So, and Rush knew when they were touring for this album that things weren't going well. They called it the Down the Tubes tour, right? I would have loved to see them perform this live back in the day, but I was just too young. And there's some really horrible footage of this tour on YouTube in black and white, and the audio is terrible. I've tried watching it many times, but it's not. Man, if they could find a tour of that and put it out, that's decent enough quality. I would eat that up in a minute. So, and then of course in the articles or in the interviews you get in the Rush DVDs and such, the band talks about how they let Paul Stanley listen to this album as it was coming out or about to be released, and because they were touring, like I said, with Kiss, and Paul Stanley looked at the band like they were crazy. Well, of course, someone like Paul Stanley is not going to get this kind of thing because Kiss were never a prog rock band, and they wouldn't get the cerebral type of stuff that prog lends itself to. Because, no offense to Kiss, and I love Kiss, but they're a party style, short and sweet type rock music, which I love. But again, apples and oranges. So for me, as far as impact goes, hence the t-shirt, I think this is a great album. I think it's genius, as I said, because of the way Rush turns some of the conventions of rock music on its head. It's still one of my favorite Rush albums. I listen to it all the time. I think it's remarkable. So please tell me in the comments section what you think and feel about this album. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have a love-hate relationship? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and have a blessed day. Take care now. Bye.